Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a week of the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. And this week we have joining us from the US, Gregory Miller. Hey, Greg. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Vasco. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. So all of you can call Gregory Greg. I mean, after all, we're all his friends. And
That's right.
Greg is an Agilist and coach who's been working in Agile software development for more than 10 years. And he hosts the Agile Within podcast with Mark Metze, who's been also a guest here on the podcast. And the podcast promotes Agile behaviors and mindset. He lives in Ohio with his wife, 4 children, 2 of which are twins. And I know what that is because my brother and sister are twins as well. So that can be a handful.
Definitely is a handful.
So Greg, tell us a little bit more about yourself and how did you end up becoming a Scrum Master?
Yeah. So my journey started back in 2010. So I was working at a company. It was a startup and I don't have an IT background. It's not my background. I'm not a developer. I don't want to be a developer. So I was looking around, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with this company. I'd been in management, different things, and there was an opening in their QA, in their development. I was like, yeah. So I took that, and it's kind of like a career change for me, and got into QA, and had no idea that I was even on a Scrum team. Didn't know what Agile was. None of that. I remember hearing one day my manager said something about that we're Agile, and I was like, what's that? So I just started doing research from there. Discovered that there's this role called a business analyst. We had one of those, and kind of learned a little bit of Scrum there. We were doing stand-ups. I realized now we weren't really fully doing it, but we were trying to. They were trying to go through a little bit of a conversion at the time, back in 2010, and then started again, like I said, being interested in becoming a BA. Started talking to the one BA we had, kind of move in that direction, and the company didn't really have an opening, so I kept on trying to learn. I actually went out in the evening. I got a certification in business analysis, paid my own money. It was a lot of money for me at the time, and counting on that it would be worth it, and got that certification. Really had no experience, and came across a consulting company locally here that was hiring for junior BAs. So I applied for it and I got it. And from there, was a BA for a while, really loved it, really enjoyed it. It has some big companies in Cincinnati. And then started realizing there's this role of Scrum Master, right? Just kind of progressing, and really got into Scrum. I was just like, the more I studied it, the more I liked it. I got the certifications, the PSM and all that stuff, going to conferences, being immersed with people. And I said, this is for me. And the one thing that really did it for me was I was realizing that, I was into Lean Six Sigma at the time, getting some certifications there, and realized that Scrum is not just like this process, like, the stand up, all the ceremonies, that's one piece of it. But what did it for me was when I realized, there's these values, and Agile Manifesto has these principles. And I'm like, you combine the two. I hear everybody say, don't do Agile, be Agile. If you don't have the two together, you're not really Agile. And I was like, yeah, that's it. Because that's just who I am as a person. The values of respect, courage, the values of Scrum, the principles of the Agile Manifesto, that really fit with me. And being a Scrum Master right now where I'm at, we call it Agilist. And actually kind of, to be honest with you, I kind of like that title a little bit better, because I don't really want to be labeled as just being able to do Scrum. I want to be able to do Kanban and XP and different types of things like that. So I kind of like the word Agilist.
And it's a whole stack, right? Like Scrum isn't Agile, or rather, Scrum isn't what Agile is. It's part of the Agile ecosystem.
It's part of it.
But
Correct.
There's a lot more out there. And of course, as we discover it, we grow. And talking about growing, today's Monday here on the podcast. So we're going to talk about a failure, Greg, and we talk about it, of course, because we want to learn from it, so that we don't need to repeat the failures that others have done. So tell us that story. Walk us through the steps. We'll dive into the details, the conclusions, the takeaways later, but walk us through that steps as you were there, meeting people, talking to people every day. How did that failure come about?
Yeah, I've had a lot of failures, as you can imagine. I'm sure you have too. One that sticks in my head that happened recently, and that's why I'm bringing it up, because I can remember it the best, is that the company I'm at was going through changes and moving things around, and we would get different teams, and I got a new team that had a Scrum Master before me. And it seems like this has kind of been a common theme in my career. I tend to be the Scrum Master that follows the Scrum Master that messed up. And this is, at least I was told, that messed up, right? I can't verify that. But so go into this team and sit down with the manager like day one. And he asks me, what work on the team can I start picking up? And I said,
as a developer, or?
Yeah. So this is where I'm going. Yeah. So I said, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, can you do some like process flows or like diagrams? I said, well, I can help out, but I'm not really a developer. That's not my role. So started to uncover what was going on there and talking with my manager. So apparently what happened is he went back to my manager and said, hey, Greg said he's not going to be doing any work. And he's like, yeah, that's right. And so the Scrum Master before me apparently wasn't really strong in Scrum. I know the person. Apparently wasn't really schooled in Scrum the way I am, the way I guess you're supposed to be, right? In my opinion. So he was actually doing the work, taking on stories, and the team loved him for it. The manager loved him for it. So I'm going to be calling this a failure at some point, because I never really quite got this manager over that hump. I kept running up against this obstacle many times, even with the team. The team was even confused with, well, Greg, what does a Scrum Master do? Like, what do you even do? Okay, I had a couple meetings with them, and I thought we were level set, and they would say, yeah, okay, I get it. Any questions? No. I had another one, even with my manager. Any questions? No. Okay, now we understand. But they still kept, the fact that I wasn't doing work, they could not get over that hump for some reason. I was doing exactly what I'd done with, many, many other teams at many companies and always been successful. I think a failure here, the way I've done a retrospect on this in my own mind and with my manager, and the failure I look back on is, I probably failed because I was very busy, to be honest with you. I had several teams going on and stuff. The failure here was I failed to probably form a better relationship with that manager and get to know him better, because that's my goal in the beginning. Is I think I set Scrum aside, try to become build a relationship with this person, so that then you can open that door to be able to talk about Scrum and the thing, because you're trying to promote change, right? I tried to change this person, but I failed at it because I didn't form that relationship. I failed to do one-on-ones with the team members on a regular basis, get to know them. To be candid, the thing that I think that where they maybe failed me is when I tried to reach out, I would get pushback from them, like, oh, we're too busy, we have all this work to do, wanting to cancel the retrospectives, which I was against, but they insisted because they were too busy. Canceling one-on-ones with me. So I think I failed to reach out to them, connect with them more, because when we had some big releases, I was not being invited to meetings like I wanted to. I felt I didn't feel included.
So at the end of the day, it sounds like you never really became part of the team in that process.
That's correct. That's exactly what I'm saying. I did not become part of the team. Again, I think it's a two-way street. I'm not taking all of the failure, but my part, like I said, my part was not getting out there enough, allowing them to tell me that they're too busy and taking that as an answer because I myself was too busy, and I had to find a way to get over that, and I didn't.
So there's one book we've mentioned, not all the time, not frequently, but sometimes we do mention the book here on the podcast. It's called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, which I think should be mandatory reading for all Scrum Masters, because our first and primary focus at work is people. It's not software. Software is developed by people, but nobody's developing the people, not even their managers. And that's a sad truth in many organizations, not necessarily because of the managers lacking in anything, but if nothing else, because they are not expected to. Right? People are supposed to be hired and know everything that they need to know and get onboarded, and from then on know everything they need to know to develop the product they need to develop, right? And that's definitely not the case at all times, because a big part of knowing how to develop a product is knowing how to work collaboratively with the people in the team and outside the team.
That's right.
So I definitely would put the book forward for those of you who might have been experiencing a similar experience on how to understand the human systemic topics, and literally how the title puts it, how to win friends and influence people, because that's our first job. Like, that's the first thing we all should have in our minds as Scrum Masters is first thing is how to win friends and influence people. Everything else comes after that, right? Even Scrum comes after that, because if you don't do that, Scrum ain't gonna help you. But that's my take on it. How about you, Greg? Share with us, what do you wish you would have done back in those days?
Put Scrum aside, and like I said, and try to understand that person, go out to lunch. Things that I did try in the beginning, trying to go out to lunch with people, nobody wanted to go because I hadn't gained their trust yet. No one knew me yet. They would go out to lunch together. I would have, with the manager, definitely done regular one-on-ones with him, gotten to know him better, gone out to lunch. I would have done one-on-ones with the team members. Believe it or not, I mean, the PO and I got along really well. And I look back, why? I sat right next to her. So we talked every day. So we kind of got to know each other and had this rapport, and feedback I got from my manager is like, she really likes me. She likes where I'm going with Scrum, and she's learning a lot. So, but the other people sat, away from me in the other cubes, and they were busy, and they would go out to lunch with each other, but I was never with them because I didn't spend time with them. And I've been in another company where I did spend time with people. It was completely opposite. So actually I had the manager there be on my side. In this case, he was like, in my situation, I mean, he was like, all the people reported to him, but they would come to me with issues. He's like, well, why don't they come to me? And I said, you got to spend time with them. So I knew what to do, right? And this was before the incident I'm telling you about. So I knew what to do. I just didn't do it. Why? Again,
it doesn't really matter in the end why, right?
Yeah.
Because we all can fall into that pattern of forgetting that actually it's through people that we do our work. We don't do work through documents or processes, even though they are important, but we do work through people.
Correct. Yes. That's a great point. We work through people, and I failed to do that. So that's
a great and insightful story. Thank you for sharing that with us, Greg.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Monday is about what we learn from our obstacles and our failures. But tomorrow is Team Tuesday here on the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. We explore teams and their journeys, the habits they develop that threaten their performance, how each of our guests help their teams evolve, and the one key lesson they learned from that experience. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.